So one of the things about the wrestling fan base in this past year, I should say, over the past several years, is the fact that it seems that they just don't understand that what they're going through, what myself and many others that grew up in the 80s, mostly the 90s, mid 90s, late 2000s, you know, many of us have already been there and done that. In other words, we've basically seen, you know, discussions of loyalty and discussions of what promotion is better, and discussions of this person should go here because they'll be better off, or if this person goes here and joins this certain hot faction in wrestling that they're going to be a somebody and stuff like that. And people just seem to not understand, fans nowadays anyway, just seem not to understand that a lot of us have been there and done that. From basically 1995, from basically 1994, 1995 actually, to 2001. We've been there, done that. With WWE, WWF versus WCW and ECW. I mean, the Monday Night Wars, the original Monday Night Wars, is a prime example of that. I mean, there was not one moment in wrestling, as a fan, that you wouldn't, talk to your friends at school, or you wouldn't read magazines with, people's opinions saying that this person would be better off here, or this person would be better off there and a part of this faction or whatever, or this person, could be better off in this area because they'd be able to let loose and pretty much be themselves. You know, and fans today, they come out and they say, "Oh, this guy would be better off in AEW because he fits their style," or "This guy would be better off in WWE because he fits Vince's style," or "This person would be better off in Impact, New Japan, and everything." You know, and they don't realize that we've been there, done that. We've seen it all before. You know, the only difference between then and now, the only difference in the past 26 years, 25 years, the only big difference is the fact that they had social media, unlike what we did back then. You see, back then we were just at the beginning stages of the internet, with AOL and all that. We were just at the beginning stages, the infancy, if you will. Well, nowadays you have, the internet in just about every home across the country, across the world. You have access to a lot, if not almost legitimate access to all these social media sites like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and all that. YouTube, is a good example. You have access to all this. This allows the fans to come out and express how they feel, even directly to the men and women that compete in the wrestling business. There are sometimes I have seen, not just this year, but in the past several years, fans adroitly tell a wrestler, man or woman, "You'll be better off here because you can be with your friends and you can have kick-ass matches." Or some would say, "Well, you know what? You have the size and you have the size and everything that a certain senile old man wants. You'd be better off there." Stuff like that. And and they wonder, and these fans wonder why the overall wrestling fan base, the overall wrestling community, I should say, frowns down upon them, looks down upon them, if you will. And it's mainly because of the fact that, what they're doing, a lot of us in the overall wrestling fan base, have already seen and been there. A lot of us that watch the WWE Network on the Peacock, or even before it went to Peacock, that might be a little younger and trying to learn about our wrestling history, like let's say a Brian Zane of Wrestling with Regret, you know, they could see exactly why the wrestling wars back in the mid to early 90s, or mid to early 2000, mid 90s to early 2000s, I should say, were what they were. Why fans, would probably be discussing the same things here and there. And the only thing closest that fans had, besides the early stages of, asking questions to wrestlers through AOL and stuff like that, the only closest proximity they had to any kind of social media like, hub, were the forums, were the message boards. I mean, one of the things that, that Solomonster, in fact, I'm going to look him up right now, does, on occasions, if I can bring it up, is his RSV, you know, videos. He does his RSVBW videos or something like that. Yeah, his RSPW rewinds. We reads off, you know, messages, from people in the early stages, if you will, of the internet. And again, this is, or even early stages of magazines and stuff like that. Because those were the closest things fans had to something like a Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or Instagram or whatever. But like I said, nowadays, not only do they have access to that stuff, but it allows them to communicate directly with the wrestlers. It allows them to communicate with, let's say, somebody like, oh, I don't know, a Kevin Owens, and basically kind of crap on him or congratulate him on re-signing with the WWE. And you can't tell me that people aren't crapping on him for resigning and not deciding to go to AEW at the end of January, because they are. Same with other people that decide to stay with the company. Some that decide to leave AEW for WWE, or some that you get the idea. You get the idea, right? The thing is, the thing is back then, RSPW forums and all that were the closest thing we had to these kind of things. And like I said, nowadays with all these social media sites, it makes again these fans looked down upon by the overall wrestling community, because like I said, we as the fans who grew up in the mid 90s to early 2000s during the original wars have seen everything. We've seen everything they're going through. We've seen this, we've seen that. But yet they seem to not want to acknowledge that to any kind of extent, because to them they think what we're saying doesn't mean anything. But there is so many similarities, it's not funny. There's so many similarities and identicalness to certain things happening, it's not funny. But like I said, the only difference is they have access to directly communicate with said wrestlers, men and women, in the business than what we did back then. And that's what makes things worse. I mean, look at what happened with Ty Conte and Sammy Guevara. Ty Conte had to delete her Twitter account just like Jordan Grace did earlier, all because fans would not leave her alone over something that allegedly she did or did not do. Back then, we wouldn't have done something like that. Because of the fact that, honestly, we never really had any, access to those kind of things. And thank God we didn't. Because who knows what would have happened. I mean, who knows what would have happened if we had things like Facebook and Twitter and all these social media, platforms available to us back then compared to now. The wrestling landscape, as far as the fans go, would probably be a lot worse than what it is now. But again, when I look back at 2021 and wrestling in general, with the wrestling fan base, when it comes to social media, it's made things a lot worse, and it's no wonder why the overall wrestling community frowns down upon them, including those that might be more supportive of one company over the other. They still try to be unbiased and fair, and thus they too look down upon these fans. And these fans, hopefully coming into 2022, will grow up and realize and even do a little research and could be like, oh, these guys have been there. They've done that. And just move on. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below in the comments as well as the live chat during the premiere. And I'm out.